computer. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so we've only got 10 pages of notes to get through. So, um, and I'll try and be more efficient with my explanations than I was this morning, so maybe we can get further. We'll cover on these highlights. I try to cover a little bit of history of how things were, and as a motivation for why we fixed them or why specific changes were made. Um, and these are just a series of highlights of the bigger items that users might see or not see, but experience benefits to. And the first one was, let me get my participant list up here again, uh, so I can follow that. And we're still learning a little bit about Zoom and how best it works. So, okay, I don't think we have anybody new who's not actually used ESP before. So
I haven't, unfortunately. I'm brand new for it.
oh, Jennifer, right.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. But have you seen it at all?
No.
Okay.
Well, that's not true. I mean, Russ showed it to me on his computer before he left.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, real briefly, and I did this morning. This is ESP. This is the main window. This is the financial grid. ESP uses a scenario-based approach to building your budget. We're looking at just one scenario, and a scenario is a complete model. It includes the financials, the employees, salary plans, grants, assumptions, and responsibility centers, all within it's on a database, so it's not Excel based, but um, it's all encompassed. The scenario includes all the settings to make that whole model work. And a scenario is equivalent to a model. But this is the financials. This is the employees. We have a lot of properties or attributes for employees. We have all the salary plans. We have grants. And then a lot of assumptions or the factors that use to drive the model. And then we have responsibility centers, which are new to probably most people. They've actually been around for 4 or 5 years, but we're actually starting to really leverage them and learn how to better involve principals and administrators, program managers, and other staff into the budgeting process to try and eliminate the shuffle of spreadsheets around or paper around to involve them in the budgeting process. So. Scenario Explorer is it's kind of like a catalog or a directory of all the scenarios that you've created, and it lets you see the history and lineage of your scenarios. The nice thing about ESP is that all of the data from, in your case, Jennifer, Infinite Visions is loaded in the background. It loads every night and it updates. So you have year-to-date actuals, period-to-date actuals, encumbrances, and everything updated every night in your scenario in the actuals data. So you don't have to worry about importing and exporting. So with that, I guess you'll just have to hold on and see what you can pick up. This training or this workshop is geared towards letting users know the changes and updates and enhancements and fixes that we've made in the last year. So, and getting ready for the next budgeting cycle. So, but if you have any questions along the way, don't hesitate to raise your hand, holler, scream, yell, and we'll see if we can answer it. Scenario Explorer, this is the first scenario you create in the year, fiscal base, you get it ready, cleaned up, get your staffing baseline, just get your model looking to where it is. And then that's where you launch your increases, your stepping, and your COLAs for next year. We create for you some reference scenarios if you want them, where you have a 1% COLA, a 1 step, and 1 day. Call them reference because they're unit, they're one based. If you know what a 1% COLA costs for salaried or classified, for certified or classified employees, you can do some quick math and figure out that 1.2% is simply a multiple of that. The same with well, stepping is kind of weird, but with work days, if you want to see what does adding 1 day to the certified plan cost, you can easily do some quick math without actually having to go in and change the settings and the model parameters to do that. So we take quite a bit of detail on the employees that we pull out of Infinite Visions. And this is what we call the employee details. It's a pretty heavy duty form. And I say that because it emulates all of the calculations for the model, including all your fixed costs, employee costs, benefits costs. So you can see it's a busy form, but it is heavy duty. I don't even like opening it up anymore, even though it's a wonderful form. It's a real heavy duty form. It takes a while to load and calculate. We've got some things changing on that front also. So I will leave that alone. I'll go back to the financials, bring up the release notes, and we'll talk about, first of all, scenario auditing and user actions. Whenever you run a scenario calculation, whether it's the employees, the full scenario, the salary plans, whenever you create a scenario version, create a new year, there's a process log that runs, and there's literally thousands of steps that are done along the way when you take such actions. And as ESP is working, it creates in the past what were called warnings. There might be some errors that are in red. Warnings were in orange. There might be notes that are supposed to be notes right there that were blue. They show up in the process log. And in the past, the definition and expectations of these items were confusing and or ambiguous. We've always had the rule that errors are problems in the scenario data that ESP support must attend to. It's something that we have to look at. There's nothing really you can do about it. And we actually get an email from the database server when errors are created, and we try to respond to them as quickly as we can. Warnings and notes, they're not errors, but a lot of people, just because they were in bright orange or a burnt orange color, they thought they were errors and they didn't know what to do. But they're not errors. They were items that we found in the scenario that should be attended to. Something like an employee with a total annual FTE over 1.0, indicating that some positions weren't closed, or that there's something wrong with their split funding coming from Infinite Visions, or just in the way that they've been created. These errors or these warnings, the question was who should be attending to these items, and it was confusing. So what we've done is we've taken the warnings, and most of the warnings which we expected the user to attend to are now called actions and are in purple. And actions and errors are summarized at the bottom of the process log after the processes of the calculation completes. And you will actually now get a pop-up window that tells you you have got action items that need to be addressed. And it is an expectation that there's something that you need to be aware of in the model, like an FTE over 1.0 or whatever you set the threshold to be, a salary or a position that has FTE but no salary, a salary plan that has no benefit plan assigned, but that salary plan has FTE assigned to it somewhere in the model. There's quite a few different audits that we do on your scenario every time you recalculate, and these action items are now identifying things that you need to do. And if you don't know what to do with them, then just call us or send us an email. But we do not get notification of actions or warnings. We only get email notifications of errors in the system. Okay, so any questions on that? So has anybody, see, it's hard with this online to look around the room and I say, has anybody seen these yet? But if you've been using the model, I know Olivia, you have. Have you seen these action items come up?
I think so.
Yeah, I know you've seen an error come up because I fixed one last week.
Yeah,
So
I've seen, and they look, yeah, it looks a little different than it used to.
yeah, okay. Well, we've actually fixed up a lot of just little things in the app to make it more usable, reliable, and friendly. So, okay, the next item, an item that we fixed. It's been a problem, and most of it was because of my ignorance on the Oregon PBAM. And everybody here's from Oregon, right? Looks like it. Good. Okay. That fund balance and revenue items that are in the 5400 series. There's 5400 series which are revenue and 9700 series which are fund balance. And different districts use them differently, and some use one code versus another. But what I found was that there's times in the year where you will go into Infinite Visions and you'll change the type code, like a 5400 from revenue to fund balance, to do some reporting. And because we load the budget elements or we update them every night, if we load your budget and there's 5400 budget items in there that did not match what we saw as a 5400 revenue, then we would go ahead and load it as either a fund balance or revenue, depending on which it was prior. And that created duplicate budget items. The amounts were fine, but we had some 5400 fund balance items showing up as revenue and some 5400 budget items showing up as fund balance. And then in the actuals, we might have them as fund balance, but in the model, we'd have them as revenue or vice versa. So anyway, it created this mess for me. And when you got to do your budget books, it was really a problem because it would break these items out separately because they were of different types. And what I finally discovered was I needed to provide a mechanism to say, if it's this object item or object type, or if it's this object code, look at this field, and it's in the budget element maintenance. And there's a way we can say, we want this to be mapped to fund balance, or revenue. So in this case, 5400 is formally defined as revenue in the Oregon PBAM. So 5400 will always come in as revenue into ESP now, whether you've got it temporarily configured as fund balance or not. It's going to come in as revenue, and that's not hard coded in the programming. It's actually coded in the budget element maintenance as allowed account types. And I've set up all the Oregon districts to do this automatically. So that actually was a pretty big change. And a lot of people didn't even know it was going on, except those that were having problems with their budget book and getting things to balance and look right. So anyway, that's what that whole budget reloading and object type codes is about. We will we allow you to set up or force a type code for an object in the budget elements, is basically the long and short of it. But it fixed up a lot of problems for us, and hopefully we've now put that whole problem to bed. In the past, probably, I guess, Tammy, maybe Olivia, we had a thing called persistent adjustments. And what we've known that in a perfect world, you'd create a budget based solely on existing data and the scenario assumptions and factors. Life would be good, budgets would be simple, and springtime is wonderful. But the reality is there will always be a need to change or override the budget item amounts calculated in the scenario. And originally we did this using a mechanism called persistent adjustments. It was very difficult to manage in the scenario, and we considered them really evil. But we knew that there had to be a way to override the amounts that ESP was calculating. And so to better understand and manage the need, to override budget item amounts calculated in the scenario. A couple years ago, we broke out what was a single amount item in the model into the components that made it up. And in the chart here, we see this used to be the old just single amount column, but now we've got an amount, a fixed amount, a calculated total. Calculated total is all your calculations, inflation amounts, the non-roll-up fixed costs, the employee totals, which is the salary, pay components, roll-up fixed costs, and employee benefits. And then we have this kind of hidden secret column called amount preserved. But these columns all make up what results in the actual budget amount. And all of them, except for the preserved amount, are actually visible in the roll-up columns of the menu on the columns. Each data set has got a roll-up columns. And so that was actually a huge help for us to be able to see and balance. And we also changed the way we did roll-ups and calculations. And it really made the scenario pretty quick and reliable and sped up recalcs quite a bit. But we still had a problem. And Russ Allen at GAPS found this problem a couple years ago. So let's say we have a pay component for what did we use? We used TSAs. I think that's what it was. So we have a pay component to calculate the TSAs. And I think that uses object 0119. Yes. So we have object 0119 in the pay component configuration. And we set the result mask to where we're going to calculate it. And whatever we calculate, we're going to put it in object code 0119 in the financial model. The problem is when we recalculate the scenario as part of the roll-up from the employee data into the financials, one of the first things that we do is we zero out the amounts of 0119, the calculated totals. And we zero out the fixed amounts the first time a scenario is calculated after it's been created, if we haven't done a step to prevent it. And what that did is, yes, the TSAs were calculated and they were calculated correctly, and the financial grid showed the proper amount from the employee grid in all the 0119 budget items. But you've found that you've had lump sum items for supplemental pay, in this case TSA, in other areas of the budget that aren't supported or aren't sourced by actual employee calculations. They're just fixed amounts that you put into the budget that happen to be in 119. You know, you might have a cell phone allowance. I think Westland Wilsonville actually put cell phone allowances in with the same budget item as phone services. And so that complicated things with fixed amounts, because fixed amounts were just as a supply and service in some cases. So what we did is we allowed fixed amounts to be preserved for items like pay components. And if, when we get done with a calculation, if we find that in the adopted budget, we had an amount, but the calculated amount is empty or nothing there, we would copy the current amount back into the amount column so that we would preserve those fixed budget items and keep his in this case TSAs, complete with all of the budget. So we had to kind of blend the calculated rolled up amounts from the employees with the fixed amounts that are just in the budget, lump sum budgeted. And that was called preserved amounts. And there used to be an option here called preserved amounts, but now it's called allow fixed budget items. So if you want to keep fixed amount items that correspond to a particular pay component, you would just check this box. And the next time you recalculate, if a budget item that had budget in the prior year or in the adopted budget wound up to be 0, it will copy that amount over back into the budget, and it'll put a blue pin next to it. So we did all that, and that was working the last couple of years, but we then found that the same situation occurs in calculations, particularly with things like PERS. And if you're self-insured, you might have a risk fund where you want to plug some workers' comp or some unemployment. So we also have the allow fixed budget items on calculations now and on the benefit plans. And they all kind of work the same way. If when we get done rolling up, if a budget item is 0 that had a budget in the prior year, and it hasn't been overridden by a direct fixed amount, it'll copy the adopted amount into that budget item. Hopefully that makes sense. And not sure if everybody's aware, when you're looking at the assumptions grid, and this is also in budget book property, in the property sheet, if you can see a little tip balloon at the right edge of the first column, if you hover your mouse over there, it'll actually pop up a little description of what that property does. And every year I get more and more descriptions in there. So hopefully they'll eventually all have pop-up descriptions in there. Okay, so that's what all that was about. And the preserved amount column is where we shove the amount. Before we override it or clear it out to 0, if the preserved amount is 0 and there is an amount in that column, we shove it into the preserved amount. So we don't actually copy it over from the adopted budget, we copy it over from that preserved amount, but indirectly it got set from the adopted budget. Okay, any questions? Answers? No? Okay, another big thing we did this year, and none of you will probably directly see the result of it, is when we started this 17, 18 years ago, I, for some reason, set it up to where we would keep a separate set of your budget elements, all your funds, all your objects, all your areas, sub areas, centers. I would keep the whole set of budget elements loaded from Infinite Visions by fiscal year. So each fiscal year had its own set of budget elements. And in the budget element maintenance form, you could see them and you'd be able to load them fiscal year by fiscal year. But when you're doing roll-ups and creating your roll-ups for budget book and reporting, I had to synchronize all of that information across all the fiscal years, because you were only updating whatever the current fiscal year was. I was constantly having to resync, and it took a long time. The more years you got in your database, it took a lot longer to update and calculate the budget elements. So what we did is we consolidated them into a single year, and they actually all say that they're part of the 2021 if you were to look in the database. But as of the update we did last month, there's only one set of budget elements now in the database, and these budget elements are messed up. They don't have a hierarchy to them. I'll have to fix that before we get to budget book. Okay, the other thing I did, I don't know if it's in the, Tim, didn't I? Oh, you can actually segregate it to where you can just look at fund or center or objects. You can actually load just a single element into the grid at a time and work with that. It used to be that all of them had to be loaded at once, and you couldn't trim down your view of the data, but they're all loaded at this point. But there's something definitely wrong in this demo database, so I have to fix that. Okay, and this was phase 1 of restructuring the budget elements. This summer, I'm going to do phase 2, which currently every budget item and employee funding record maintains its own account code with all of the separate elements and as IDs. So it breaks up the account code into its individual pieces, keeps those separate, and then keeps the internal database key, a numeric key to that record, pointing back to the budget elements table for every single record. And that's just not very efficient. So this summer, I'm going to consolidate every account code into a single table, and then use a reference to it from the budget items and the employee fundings. And that's the way the ERPs have done it. So, and it seems to work very well. So that should give us some more efficiency and additional reductions in calculation times and grid loading. So, okay, off to the application. Do we have any questions yet? Okay. So most everybody here, yep. Oh, Matthew Deeds, we have somebody new. Hello, Matthew.
Hello, Scott.
Matthew, where are you from?
Oregon City.
Oh, okay, you're working with Susan, okay. Okay, Susan was on this morning. Okay. So most of you are all working through Citrix. I think everybody is. No, Tammy's working through our cloud network. I think everybody else is through Citrix through their ESD.
Yep.
And so sometimes when you're using Citrix, as we pop up different windows, windows can get lost, and it's hard to find them sometimes in a terminal services environment. And particularly for us when we're looking for different windows. So we added this Windows menu item that actually lists the windows that are associated with the ESP app. So like, remember earlier I opened Scenario Explorer and I opened one employee details and the budget element. So you can then click on this on the particular form and get it to open that particular window. So items aren't actually lost anymore. So this is just a tool to help manage your window environment when things seem to have gone awry and you can't find windows. We did change the title of the budget book and Scenario Explorer. It used to be the whole the application name was in the title of Scenario Explorer and Budget Book. Now we just call it what the window is, so that it's easier to see in the menu. And also in the past, people might have been working with us on the phone when we're troubleshooting or working on something. We'll have you do a Control F5 or what we call an application reset. View reset application. It's the closest thing to shutting ESP down and reopening it. It refreshes all the lookup tables, all the grid columns and everything like that. But it wasn't actually closing all the extra windows. And that was creating some problems with cached information in those windows like Scenario Explorer. So it wasn't refreshing the data in the window. So at this point, we made a change that when you do a reset application, and I'm not going to save any changes, it's going to close all the windows except for the main window. And then you just have to reopen them. Not a big deal, but it's something that was important to us. Okay. And if we look now, it's reloading the app. You can see there's no windows, no additional windows open. So it's closed them all. Okay, scenario scope. Might make me wait. All right. So one of the first things that we did is we moved the account type codes onto the front tab. So you no longer have to go to the filter tab to change which account codes you want to see. So if I want to look at just fund balance and revenue, I'm going to take that school out of there. And change my scope. You can see I can easily change the type account type codes in the budget in the budget scope form. Okay, scenario scopes. Now this, I apologize. We had a problem with this next item, and I might have broke it, but we'll see. You'll get the idea. In the past, the financials and the employee grid were tied to the same scope. In other words, whatever was showing on the financials had to be the same scope and summary levels that were in the employees. Well, now there's a button here. It's this button right here, Scope Lock, that you can unlock it and have the employees be on a different scope. So if I go over to the employees, it's going to have that same scope. And that button actually should be on right now, but it's off. Like I said, we detected a problem this morning and I was in there trying to mess with it. And but we'll get that fixed to where it works as expected. But this will allow us to look at maybe a full detail on the financials and a subset of the employees, or subset of the employees and the full summary on the financials. And you can go back and forth without having to worry about changing your scopes. So if I change this now to be, we'll just look at one school. We'll look at the high school and license salaries on the employee grid. Now, because this is not on, that's what it looks like when it's on. I should be able to go over here and maintain that original scope that I had. And then if I lock it, now this is where I might have broke it. When I go back to the employees, it should switch, and it did. Maybe I fixed it. So anyway, the scope lock lets you unlock the financials and employee scope. So when we're looking for imbalances, or we're looking for deltas and variances and calculations, it's sometimes really handy to separate those scopes. Scope lock account code paste. If I'll go back to the financials. If you're working with a spreadsheet, or you have another document, or in this case even ESP, and you have an account code on the clipboard. So actually I'm going to copy this amount to the clipboard. And you can see this new button right here. It's a clipboard with a little scope symbol on it. As soon as I copy what looks like an account code to the clipboard, it makes it available. So now on the scope bar, I can paste that as my new scope, and it will take me right to that scope. It won't change the summaries, but it will reset the scope. So if you're messing around with full summaries, if you got the ideal scope going, you can get the full scope of object 120 in there without having to change a lot of different things. This is handy what I talked about when we have an error log come through an email that might have an account code identified. Well, we can just copy that account code from the email And as soon as we activate the ESP form, it checks the clipboard and sees, and the way it does it is it counts how many segments there are. If there's at least, let's see, this has 6 segments. If there's at least 5 segments on the clipboard separated by a dot, it will paste it. It may not, they may not be valid elements, but it will go through and see, it'll try and bring up a scope like that. So again, just another simple tool that can make your day go a little bit faster. Reset scope. If I come in and I change my scope, I might move things around. 031, or I start putting in a 0111, comma 0115 to 0119. Oh, and that's not what I wanted to do, and I don't want to clean up. I can hit this new undo or revert to original scope, and it'll put the scope back to the way it was when I opened the form. And I'm going to go back to my simple scope. Nope. If I keep my scope small, things work faster. Reset scope and play reconcile. I'm not sure how many of you have used or are aware of the employee reconcile feature in ESP. This is handy when you're doing fall balancing and you want to check your Infinite Visions loaded data with your adopted budget or with your staffing plan for the new year. And let's see, I'm going to, a lot of times you just, I'm going to put in a, oh, my account code's not even on there. Let me add my account code. And then I'm going to just do function 1131 or function 1111. And my objects. So once I have a scope established that I want to look at and I want to check my employees, I can then put my scope or my grid in a reconcile mode. I thought I saw 111s in the scope. Oh no, because that's K5. There wouldn't be 111s in there.
Not in that center, yeah.
We'll just eliminate that. We'll just do it by the center. And Jim Scherzinger has joined us. Good afternoon, Jim. Good to see you again.
I don't think he can hear us.
Yeah, he waved at me. So I think he can hear me.
Shake your head, Jim, if you can hear us.
Yeah.
All right, I guess so.
Okay, so let's say we've got our budget, July's passed, we went through the summer and we're into October, school has started, and we want to do our fall balancing or our reconciliation. And we've loaded, I actually have the daily employees in there. You can reconcile the daily, but usually you want to do a static load from Infinite Visions into the current or Infinite Visions columns, and then check to see how your adopted budget align with what HR actually staffed, or how the schools were actually staffed. And so I'm going to go back to the scope form. And I'm going to go to the Reconcile tab. And there's this scenario I'm reconciling to. And I'm going to reconcile the infinite visions. And I want to look for new or missing employees, or in positions where the account code, pay type, and position ID don't align. And what's new is this order by, and it's currently set to employee. So this is going to allow me, and I want to look at grouped columns. This is going to allow me to see by employee what changes have been made in Infinite Visions compared to my model. And it's going to give me the opportunity to select which items I want to bring into my model, to say, yes, that's correct. Yes, that's correct. You could actually go through this reconciliation process, recalculate your scenario, and actually come up with a revised budget based on how staffing was actually implemented across the district, and upload your working budget or operating budget into Infinite Visions. So here we're looking at a grid. It's got this new column called Reconcile, and it's showing me all the differences between my model in the green and my Infinite Visions columns in the blue. And wherever there's a difference, you're going to see the opportunity to move those changes in. So like in this case, the work days, what were the work days? 186. I'm not sure what's different, but you can look at the model and the Infinite Visions records, and just by checking these check boxes, you can say, I want to bring these changes in. Or you can accept them all for an employee by checking that employee, or you can take everything that's in there and reconcile it. And as soon as you save and apply adjustments, what it's going to do effectively is the same thing as if you right-clicked on each funding and say, copy from Infinite Visions, copy from Infinite Visions, copy from Infinite Visions. It allows you to do it in bulk, that operation of reconciling your budget or reconciling your employees. I know that most people have gotten used to working outside of the reconcile mode. I'm not going to save those changes. And just going center by center, program by program, or some other way of looking at your staffing, and then just using the copy from Infinite Visions or copy from Infinite Visions daily. And the difference is the blue current columns, they are loaded by you when you want to load them. The purple Infinite Visions daily columns are updated every day. So as soon as a new employee shows up at the district and shows up in the payroll system, you'll actually see them in your employee data the very next day. Oh, I guess I was meant to show you that you can sort by employee, by position. In position, if you implemented position-based budgeting where you actually use your position numbers to manage the positions, that can be really handy, because then you can find out the people who retired and who replaced them, because they're going to share the position control numbers. And so here's education assistant. Do we see any with 2 names? If you had 2 names in there, that would be a potential replacement. Unfortunately, with Infinite Visions, they do a lot of changes with position numbers, and it can really be hard to track. And you can also do it by account code. So just some different tools, different views of your data, so you're able to bring them in and either accept new positions through the budgeting cycle, or again in the fall balancing timeframe to update your adopted staffing plan into a working staffing plan. And here it is by account code. So you can see everybody at Reynolds School District, or excuse me, Rainier School District, who's a teacher, a 111, a 112. You can put all the other elements in there if you wanted to. Okay, that was a long one. Let's see. Scenario scope. Added position we added position of supplemental flag filters. They're very similar to query by example filters. Because we have supplemental in position, we actually have supplemental positions. Some districts are now putting FTE on some of the coaching positions or some supplemental positions for PERS reporting. And so there is the concept of a supplemental position, in other words, supplemental pay that has FTE. So you can filter out based on those properties on the scope. Position, added undo button. Salary plan active. There was a problem we fixed when you originally opened the salary plans. It would say that you're only looking at active salary plans, but yet it was showing both active and inactive. So when it starts up, it shows by default just the active. That's all you see right now. So that was a bug that we fixed. And a salary plan can be set to inactive if, like during the new year creation, if we detected a plan was replaced and that plan has become empty. In other words, there's nobody or no dollars or FTE in a salary plan, and all plans, grades, or steps, or planned lanes and steps will deactivate it. It'll still be there. You can just open the scope form and turn on to show inactive. Actually, I have them both on now. I set that on this morning. So now the filter's telling me we're just looking at active. Okay, edit undo button. I showed you that. Did I do? Okay, common grid columns. So in this case, I'm looking at a delta column. I'm going to hide it so we can recreate it. To do a delta column, you put two like columns side by side. You can either right click, calculate, and you can do a delta percent, delta value and percent. You can do product quotients and sums. So you can build simple validation columns right in the grid. But the most common is the delta value. And you bring it up, it lets you put in a label for the column heading. Bobby O, we'll call it. And so it's going to do a delta of the two adjacent columns and give you negative or positive indications. If you don't like the way the negative signs or minus signs are set, you just move one to the other and it'll update them and do the math the other way. Because I didn't let ESP set its own label, if I use this button, it's actually going to put the delta symbol in there with the column that it's adjacent to. And it used to be that when you use the toolbar button to create the delta columns, it would prompt you for that label. Now it does it automatically. So the only way you can get a custom label in there is to do the actual calculated add, or once the delta column's there, you can change the label here. And if you put that in there, it'll put the delta sign in there. So that makes the delta or the calculated column stand out a little bit more in the grids. And this be when a main toolbar button is used to add a delta column, you no longer prompted for a label. There was save to spreadsheet. There was quite a few little changes made to the save to spreadsheet. We found in different formats the data wasn't being set up properly, but now I think all formats look pretty decent. Here's the formatted, which is the slowest. This one takes the longest to create because it's creating a lot of columns. It's having to set the formatting, which includes the background colors, the foreground colors, cell by cell in Excel. For Matthew, let's see, Matthew and Jim, and who else is there? Where's my list? Jennifer. Yeah, Jennifer. The save to spreadsheet is really, really handy for just getting a quick output of any of the main grids. You can get a pretty looking picture or image of that in Excel. We also have unformatted, which is much faster. It still is in the same format with the hierarchy tree on the left, but we don't actually do all the colorization and formatting, so it becomes pretty simple. And then the other format that's there is raw data that will take the data and it will unpivot the hierarchy column into separate columns. So you have one for the fund, one for the center, and one for the object. And this works even if you have all your elements in the hierarchy and they're unsummed. There were some other issues with formatting, like if there was a percent sign in any column, it would treat it as a percent rather than text. So we just had a bunch of little stuff that we fixed up with the save to spreadsheet. Okay, raw format, fixed issue, strike through font. If a particular employee or record was being excluded from the budget for some reason, oh, it won't let me do that because I'm in reconcile mode. Let me come out of that mode. So if I went in and I set this person to pending, it wasn't reliably putting the strikeout font on that cell. So, and if you didn't save it to the formatted mode, if you saved it to unformatted, it was hard to see that that person was not in the budget. Let's see what it. Oh, I did. Oh, it brought up the raw. It's right here. So now you can see, and I'm not sure, Tim, we fixed it. It used to actually include the numbers, but you can see now we did make it smart enough that that person is out of the budget. So it actually removes their numbers from their actual cost numbers from the spreadsheet. I think that was something we did fix. I didn't get that in the notes. To save the spreadsheet, strike through employees with a full sum scope. If I don't know if people know, you can actually sum all the elements in the scope and basically just get a table of the employees. Still didn't come out of reconcile mode. There we go. So you can see you don't have any of the hierarchy, but you'd have to add the account code back in if you wanted to see it. And that's employees, you've been able to do that for quite a while, probably for 5-6 years. But just in the last year, probably the year before or last, we actually made it so you can put the financials grid in a mode to sum all the elements and get just a table into the spreadsheet. Okay, save the spreadsheet. With save the spreadsheet, if you were to do a selection, like if you wanted to block just a certain number of rows, and then select away from it, it was leaving messed up cell colors. So you'd have just splotchy back colors, not set right. You can also do a block selection and hit the save the spreadsheet, and it's just going to do those employees. And that should come up here. Okay, so there we did just the section of the spreadsheet that we selected. Okay, any questions so far? All right, query by example. So I'm going to go back over to financials. And query by example is a way in the grid to do customized filtering. So if I want to look for every budget item in my scope that's greater than 100,000, I can do that. And they're showing me all of that. What was the reset button here? We changed it to look just like the other reset buttons throughout the app. So we changed that color. The QBE result column, it's actually got kind of a purplish gray background color. That's always been defined, but it wasn't actually showing up. So we fixed that so that would show up. Another thing while I'm here on QBE, once you're into a query by example, if you double click the parameter row, it'll put you back into the edit mode, and you can actually then do a and FT, it's just greater than 0. I don't need to type the column. I'm used to typing SQL queries. So you can actually do multiple column filters with query by example. So here we're looking at any amount over 100,000 and FTE greater than 0. And then to clear it all out and get yourself back to the previous scope, you hit the reset button and take you back to your primary scope. No filtering. The item C, we found that if you were in a query by example filter mode, you were allowed to make changes to the budget, but the changes weren't actually saved to the grid. You weren't actually able to trigger the save changes. So that's a bug we fixed. The other, let's see, number 5, grid loading. When you do a scope with multiple summaries, let's go ahead and put this grid in the ideal scope. I like to put the object at the bottom. When you have a lot of different levels in your hierarchy, this account code at each level of the summaries, we actually put the effective account code at that level, and it was not calculating the proper level or the proper account code, because it would do it if we were in the formal order of our account elements, but it wasn't setting these up properly, and that's been fixed. There's something else about this. I don't remember what it was. Okay, employee grid loading. When you're working with the employees, I don't know, most people hopefully know by now that an employee with the little blue-red boxes next to them in the hierarchy or tree indicate they're split funded or they have multiple fundings. In this particular case, just because we have everything summed up, you know, if we have multiple employees, they're probably showing up side by side. Well, here's like Kane, Ian Kane. He's got multiple fundings, but if you're sitting there wondering, well, where else is he in the budget? You can right click, what's the matter with that? And say, show all Kane, Ian with his ID, and put the grid in a context mode where it's showing just the records for that one employee. And you can see the total picture of his fundings. And so there's his, hold on, I gotta write that down. Okay, so you can see all of the fundings that are associated with Ian Kane. And you could actually make changes, like if you wanted to change his work days, you could do that here and save those changes. And once you've gone into that context grid where we're looking at just one employee, to get back, you can use this reset button. And it preserves the grid the way it was when you left the main mode, and it will restore it now back to where you were before we started that show all. One of the cool things about ESP, little creature feature, is when you close ESP and reopen it, it's going to bring you right back where you left off. It's going to show you the grid you were on. It's going to show you the row you were on, and it may not have all of the hierarchies open and closed, but it will have the record that you were on open and visible in the grid. And that's really been kind of a chase, is to get that all done right. And I think we've got it where it's working very, very well. So when you reopen ESP after it's closed, it will open up and right to the spot where you left it. And that's true if you were to change computers, because that information is stored in the database user profile. So hopefully with the new web application, it'll actually pick it up there and put you in the right spot where you left off using the desktop app. If we have a grid that has multiple top elements, in other words, in this case, I only have one top element. So I'm going to go 100 dash, trying to think, let's go 299. So we'll get special revenue in there. So this should create more than one top level element. I'm hoping I have some 200 funds in there. Yes, so see, it added a total now. And if you if you use the control key with these expand collapse buttons, it'll do the whole grid at once. And so now it won't, in the past, it would actually sum up and look like that when you did a control collapse. But now, and a control plus expands the whole tree. And now you can collapse the whole thing, expand the whole thing. And if you're at this level, I don't know if you know, if you hit this button, it'll collapse it one layer at a time. So you can get it maybe to a view that's more palatable, and the same going up. It's like, rather than having to click individual expand collapse node buttons. Okay, full collapse. When you did a fill down, if I go over to the employees, let's say, see, I've got a mix match in days in this group here. Let's say I wanted everybody to be at 232. So if I block that and I do Control D, I can either do Control D, or I can right click and say replicate all. It wasn't setting the edit property. It wasn't forcing the grid to know that those rows were dirty. So you could then actually change the rows. And now you can see in the changes for that grid, all the changes were registered, but that was a problem. Control D, okay, split. When we did the split and move functions on an employee, it wasn't requiring the account code to change, which if you're moving or splitting, you're ideally moving them to a different account code, and the dialog boxes for the account code editing were not. If I want to split this Laura Berger, you have to now make sure you change the account code. So it's going to bring up employee details, and now it's going to ask you, okay, where do you want to split her record? And how many work hours do you want to split? How many does she have? She have 8. I want to split 3.5 hours, and I'm going to put it in communications. So it kept the whole person whole at 8 hours, and it's going to refresh. It's doing some calculations. Oh, it didn't refresh. Or it refreshed and didn't save that split. 3.5 communications. There. Okay, so it kept the person whole, calculated 1.0 FTE, but it didn't register a change in the account code. So I'll manually change it. I'll have to look at that and find out why it's not working as advertised. I don't recommend splitting anymore in the employee details, but we will fix that. I'm not sure what broke on that.
Where are the work days 232? Is that right?
Well, yeah, the work days, it's the work hours that split, not the work days.
All right, okay.
Yeah. We'll be looking at another way to split without having to use the employee details. Okay. Hold on. Refresh. And I'm going to abandon these changes. If where were we? Fixed. Okay. We had a problem in the past, mainly on the financials grid, but sometimes on the employee, that this little account object was being duplicated. It might have been, it should be here because that's the object element. Oh, that's what I was going to tell you earlier. When you're in a expanded grid like this, and you don't know where you are, like which element is 100. If you look up here in the scope bar, you see it's light blue. It's telling me that that's the area, and that's the object, and that's the center, and that's the function. But the objects should have an object next to them, a glyph or an icon to tell you that that's the actual object and what type of object it is, where this is a supplemental pay and this is an employee roll-up. So the 112s will be rolled up into the budget. But we were seeing that this was being duplicated not only on the row it was supposed to be on, but on the prior row. We fixed that. Edit application setting. Oh, if you want, if you're making good use of the save to spreadsheet as kind of a quick reporting tool, I'm going to change my scope back here. Go back to a modeling scope. Get a simple grid here. And if you're going to print this out in the formatted version, some people would rather know which one of these are numbers and which ones are FTE. You can go over the Assumptions tab and turn on the ability to show dollar signs in the grid for the currency or money-based columns. You know, I'm bouncing all over. It's driving the grids nuts. So if I come up to the top scenario factors, there's a number of factors that are editable with the scenario that are actually global settings. And they actually will impact all the scenarios or impact the database everywhere. And this show dollar signs in grid is one of them. If these properties have an asterisk next to them, that means you're going to get a warning when you set them. This is a global application setting that affects all scenarios and will be applied immediately. So I'm going to click OK. So I now have show dollar signs in the grid, and it's going out and doing a little work. And then I'm going to go over to the financials and refresh. And we now have dollar signs in the grid, and the FTE or the decimal values don't have the dollar signs next to them. So that's just another little added feature if you're using the Sage spreadsheet to do kind of reporting to give to people. They want to see where the dollars are and where the FTE are. Okay. Fixed grid sorting. On the scenario audit, this we found that the grid sorting was all messed up when the first column was actually a date time. It was sorting from oldest to newest instead of newest to oldest. And that's in this grid. I'm not sure if a lot of people know that that's actually there, but it can really be handy if you're trying to figure out what happened when you did something or when you made a particular change, or You can see we're logging when databases are copied, we're logging when databases are updated. When scenarios are recalced, it'll make a recalc of what the general fund budget and FTE was. And you can actually see when changes occur on your scenario log. It also logs every adjustment session that's created, and you can then look at the actual adjustments that were made inside of each of those sessions. You can also hit this adjustments tab, which can be rather lengthy, but it'll actually show you every adjustment or every change that's been made to this scenario. Who made it, when they made it, what time they made it, what the old value was, what the new value was, and even what workstation they were at. So that's we use that quite a bit when we're trying to track down specific changes in how a certain budget item got the way it was. And thankfully, it's proven invaluable because usually we can account for changes, inadvertent changes in the scenarios using that log and grid. Okay, that's the common grid functions and those are mostly common across all the grids: financials, employees, salary plans, grants, assumptions, everything. Specifically on the financial grid, I'm going to go over and we're going to go back to a full scope. I'm going to pick an elementary school because it's smaller. We'll pick Glacier Peak, and I'm gonna reset. You can click this reset button, and it'll reset the order into the formal order as defined. And then I'm going to move my object down. And the last element is the sub area. And that's defined as being optional in the budget element configuration table. And what that means is, even though it's there in 000, we're not going to, actually in this case, we are including it. Let me put it at the last one. I'm going to move it to the last element. If it is the last element and it is the default of 000, it's not going to show it in the grid. It's going to eliminate that level and simplify the grid. There we go. So you can see, even though it's there in the account code, the 000 levels are not showing up in the grid. Now, if we had an item that had a sub area in it, it would actually add the sub area node, and it would show that record with the non-000 sub area in it. And if there was a 000 and like a 049 or some other sub area, it would show them both nested under the sub area. Okay, added show. If we're sitting in here and we're looking at this particular program or area, and we're saying, gosh, 19 FTE. I didn't know we had 19 FTE. What is in that 19 FTE? You can right click and click show employees, and it's going to switch over to the employees grid and set that scope up and show you just those employees that are within this scope of the account code. And I'm not going to guarantee it's going to say 19 because my scenario has a red flag, which means it's not fully calculated, but I have a feeling it will. And there's my 19 FTE there. And here's all the positions that make up that amount in the financial budget. And you can do the same thing with budget. If you're sitting here, of course, we're looking at just this particular center. But if I wanted to look at just the budget for this, I can click show budget, and it's going to set my scope up to be just that area and isolate that budget. Okay. Just hopefully little things that help speed your day along. Show employees, but those are duplicates. I apologize. I did duplicate them from up above. Another bug we fixed, empty budget elements were not being flagged as empty in the grid. And if they are empty, and that means they have, I apologize, I have a lawnmower going in the background. I didn't know that was going to happen. An empty budget item means that the model data set, the Infinite Visions data set, the actuals data set, and the baseline data set must all be empty. And then they'll show a little silver box in the tree column, and then they could actually be deleted. But they can only be deleted if they're totally empty. Multiple spreads. I don't know if anybody's done spread adjustments where you can actually reduce a budget item. We had a problem with this with spread calculation this morning. It triggered a grid error. But we're going to try one. Let's take and well, this is probably only going to result in a single item. Let's change my scope. It wouldn't be a spread because we're at a full account code anyway. So let's clear that. Let's go Fund 100. Center 031, and then object up. All right, so I'm going to go down and let's say I want to reduce consumable supplies at Rainier High School, and I want to reduce it by 10%. It's going to go out and it's going to calculate. First of all, it's going to say, okay, 10% of my amount is 206, or is 20,602, and it's going to go out and calculate 10% off the budget every place that object 460 is used, and it's going to distribute that down. And I would just have to save and apply, and it would make 26 adjustments to the budget, reducing supplies and materials by 10%. Now let's say I wanted to do 5%. Oh, did I put a minus? I just put 20%. I'm going to put minus 5%. So it actually was going to increase it. I'm going to put a minus 5% there, and it's going to calculate another 3 adjustments to remove 1,233. And we could just save and apply this, and it would actually do a total of 27 budget changes all at once with the multiple spreads. Okay. Again, I apologize for that. Can you guys, is that annoying? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's not really that loud, Scott.
Oh, good. Maybe
We hear you fine.
Maybe Zoom is filtering out that ambient noise.
Yeah, you sound fine.
Okay, it's rather loud to me. So, all right. So I'm going to refresh that, and we'll get rid of that. So that's kind of cool. I don't know if everybody knew that the spread adjustments were there, but it is a nice way to be able to make widespread changes to your budget. If you in your adopted budget, you create a copy, make a working or just another model, and you want to start making some sweeping changes, save a base, recalculate, save a baseline, then just go start reducing 10% here. What happens if we reduce 10% in utilities? What happens if we reduce 10% in supplies? What will that do to my budget? You'll actually create a full detailed model budget with those changes in it. You could create a budget book where it would break it all out by what's affected where with comparisons, and be able to present a pretty good picture of what the planned reductions are going to do to you. Okay. multiple spreads, added show employees. Okay, that's the duplicate. Okay. This first item is pretty simple. It was just a name on the employee grid. The copy from Infinite Visions and copy from Infinite Visions Daily. It didn't have the Infinite Visions name on there properly. If you have benefit plans that are set up to use the fixed rate, or essentially use the total amount that's in the ERP or the payroll system, and it's actually an editable amount, then your benefits cell, this cell right here, would actually be editable, and you could update their benefits right here in the employee grid. The same is true if you're on a range salary schedule or a salary plan that doesn't have a fixed amount. It's a range. Then the annual rate column is now also directly editable in the grid, and you don't have to open up employee details to change either of those numbers. You can do them right in the grid. Fixed rate. Yeah, that's what the next one is. Okay. Salary plan stepping. We corrected some logic on the salary plan stepping glyphs, and we made them a little bit brighter. Some of the longevity stepped and max step labels were not showing up properly. So that was just some logic we had to set up. And I'm not sure if many of you know about longevity stepping. You can actually set up a required years of district service on your salary schedules to indicate that they have to have so many years of district service before they can step into that step. Now, many districts will use the existing Infinite Visions salary schedule tables. And if there's a step between, if you're at step 5 and then you have to have 10 years of service before you actually make the next step, they'll just duplicate the year 5 step from 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, having the same amount. And then they would then naturally step to 10 to get the new amount. But some districts either manually set it up or they do it that way, and then they can do the auto stepping. We can do it with simply applying required years of service, which is what we call longevity stepping. And if you have that, then it's got a little different glyph. The up arrow is a broken line going up, which means they longevity stepped.
Quick clarifying question on that. Maybe the group, maybe you, Scott.
Oh, somebody was listening.
Oh yeah. No, I run into this problem every time. So when you say longevity stepping, is that a functionality in Infinite Visions that begins there, or is that a functionality only in ESP?
It's only in ESP. And so if you have implemented that repetitive stepping, then you can't implement it here. Now, I think we did this for GAPS for Russ Allen probably about 6-7 years ago, and so I'm not sure. I'm guessing what happened is they don't use the auto stepping capability in Visions. They manually go in and update steps. Olivia, do you use stepping in Visions?
We just do annual step increases. We don't have any longevity step things.
But do you actually use the step, the next step function in Visions to move them up the schedule, or do you actually go in and manually edit each employee?
I'm assuming our HR department does that, and
Yeah.
I'm assuming that they use the function in Infinite Visions.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just curious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
okay. Yeah, we have a separate salary schedule for the longevity, and so then like step 1 would be the same. Like if it's 03, then it's 03 on this separate schedule with the 70 cents once they hit the 15-year, and then $1 more an hour once they hit the 20.
Right.
So we probably have a pay component set up for you then, right? A separate pay component based on their years?
We could do that. We just, because we have to follow what HR did, Tim.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like a longevity schedule like we did at Reynolds, where it is over and above. It's that, yeah, you could do it our way, and it's much more elegant, but you'd have to get Tyler to implement that functionality. I think we're easier than Tyler on things like that.
I was just curious how it would pull back into Infinite Visions to pay them correctly, because we have everything that pulls in.
Well, we don't ever pull the employees back in.
Right.
So it's just a dollar amount when it hits your budget.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
HR doesn't use our data to pay next year.
It would be lovely if we could, but there's not an ERP payroll system around that's going to let us dump our data, our employee calculations back in.
Tammy might add a couple of zeros to her pay
Yeah.
if that was the case.
No, she's generous.
No.
She'll take a couple zeros off. Anyway, okay. So sign range, okay, longevity stepping, added a new. Some of you over the years might have noticed some of the employee names get kind of messed with as far as casing. In most financial systems, employee names, element names, most identifiers are all in uppercase. And I hate that. I just don't like it. It's not presentable when you're doing budget documents to make them readable. So we go through a pretty elaborate proper casing function when we load the data from the ERP system. But we did find that some of the employee names were really getting messed with because we also have an acronyms table out there, and we would replace acronyms with uppercase sets of data. So because the proper casing would proper case acronyms, which should all be capitalized. So we created an acronyms table, but we found it was messing up with employees. Like in this example, Scheffler von Bracht would wind up with VON if there's a VON string in the acronym table. So what we did is we just created a separate proper casing function for people names that does not use the acronym. And so that's added a lot of more reasonable employee names. But we've added some rules over the years to handle O'Connors and O'Callahan and Mick Jagger. No, not Mick Jagger. And McDonald and McDaniel. And so our employee names are looking pretty decent after we do the proper casing. Okay. Skyward, nobody's here for you. Oh, wait. No, Beth was this morning in Skyward. Was Beth here this afternoon? Everybody's here from Oregon, so we don't have to worry about that. We did have a problem, for those of you who've been around a while, we've always chased the employee details form that essentially emulates the calculations on the server. After you made changes in employee details and saved them, the employee details form would come back still saying changes need to be made. We call that a dirty form save. We found one of the problems was after activating a split funding or making certain changes, a second employee recalc was required to get the benefits to calculate correctly. I'm saying we've done a pretty good job trying to alleviate all those dirty saves, but we still might see some, but this was one of the big ones, and I think we've eliminated this one. Number 9, we fixed a leap year issue with the years of service calculation. And I don't know if you know, there is an application setting because every district kind of calculates and interprets their years of district service differently. And there is a setting, calculate employee years of service. This setting right here, many districts, they manually set their years of service and they don't want us to calculate it. It's not as simple as their hire date, and then we have a pretty fancy years of service function to calculate that. Where we get into trouble is when people are terminated and they've been rehired. Different districts implement different rules on whether they leave their original hire date where it is, whether they move the hire date, whether they change the whole deal. So by default, we have calculate years of service off. If we turn that on, we will take whatever the hire date was as the original hire date and calculate a span of years based on the fiscal year, and it's smart enough to even know that the fiscal year begins in July rather than January for an even calendar year. Okay, fixed leap year issue, quick grid tasks. Okay, gosh, it's 2:41. We're 20 minutes ahead of where we left everybody this morning because we left them at step 10. So let's look at that. And I told you that we had some other ways for doing split fundings. Now, over the years, we have tried to minimize the reliance on the big employee details form because it is a heavy form. It does take a while to load up and calculate, but it's nice that it shows you the entire employee, whether they've got 6 split fundings or 1. It shows their supplemental pay. It gives the whole picture in one form, and it allows you to make changes, and it's a very dynamic form. It recalculates everything and shows you what it is. You make the changes and cross your fingers and hope everything comes back and there's no changes. But it's heavy duty. And if all you want to do is simply split an employee, you can actually, let me find, where's a 8-hour employee? Let's split Chris Wolf. So I'm going to right click on him. And if you look on your context menu now, you can see there's now a quick group and an employee details group. These here are the original ones where you add a budgeted position, add a vacancy, split funding, split the segments, and then clone fundings. And everybody always asks me, what's the difference between clone funding and add budgeted position? Add budgeted position is going to replace your lookup values with like your default PERS status code. It's going to use the default work days. It's going to annualize the position. It's going to assume that that's going to be a full position for the next year using the default lookup tables that would be normally tied to an employee. It's also going to set the age at 25 and set their birth date appropriately and to figure out the years of service and all of that. Clone is actually going to just make a straight copy of the employee. But now we've got these quick versions where if I click split, it's going to pop up the form. Okay, where do you want to split to? I'm going to split him to education assistant, and I'm going to again split 3.5 hours off. I'm going to put a comment in there, and I'm going to click OK. And it's going to do this without opening up the employee details. It's still going to recalculate him, but it's going to do it without opening that form, and then it's just going to add the new split into the grid. And if you ever want to actually watch, you can actually see what ESP is doing by looking at the process log. This might be a little bit slower this first time because I don't think I've run it since the database was updated. If we do another one, we should be faster. Boy, that's over a minute. It doesn't take this long. If it does, then something is wrong.
Yeah, I did it yesterday, and it was quicker.
And it is also doing the cost center roll up on that too. Okay. All right. Where did it put him? Oh, I moved him out. I have a full, where did I move him to? You can see it split him. He's only got the 4.5 hours. I changed the sub area, didn't I?
Do a show all.
Yeah, I can either do a show all or let me, I moved him into an area that's not in my scope.
Or it's in the comments too, where you moved
Yeah,
to.
I just take this out. So there he is. There's his other new split at 3.5 hours. So the other thing that I can do now, and this is actually brand new, it's literally still smoking, it's so new, is you can, why is that gray? I'm going to change my scope. Center 10, function 111. Oh, let's just do that. That should give me, I hate dead air. I could sing. No. Okay. So now, I don't know why. Hold on 1 second. Because this is a cool change.
Maybe you can't add it when it's has a sum scope in it. Possibly. Shouldn't affect it.
No, because you and I were both testing this weekend. Split grid. All right. It actually says that it's, says that it's enabled. Oh, split to the grid is, but oh, add. Okay, so I'm going to do this quick add function, and I'm going to just add a budgeted position. And it does take a minute, and this actually, I think we're going to shorten this time up with support for the new web app. So what you do is you get a pretty lightweight pop-up form, and you can change the ID, you can change the name, budgeted position for testing. You can change the account code if we wanted to also put that down at 51. You could change you don't have all the abilities to change everything. You can change the salary schedule, you can change the work days, put a comment in. And then add it, and it's going to go out and save it, and then add it to the grid. So you can quickly add both vacancies and budgeted positions, changing just a subset of all the employee details. Everything else is going to be based on the employee that you right-clicked on and triggered the add or the add budgeted position or add vacancy. That's why this is taking a little bit longer, Tim, is because it's doing the responsibility center rollup. And then if we come down here, oh, there it is, budget position for testing. And if I wanted to find a position, let's say David or Joy Simpson, if we want to create a vacancy for her, we right click, create vacancy. And it says add new vacancy from Simpson Joy I. It says Simpson Joy vacancy. We kind of changed this. It used to say a vacant position with the employee name in it, but users wanted to actually see it in the grid next to the person they created the vacancy for. But if we wanted to move them, change their salary schedule down, the salary stepping works. This is a test. They want to change anything else? No. I guess I turned that on. I can turn it off. So then hopefully that vacancy is going to show up right beneath the record that we created it for. I think a few years ago, at one point when we decided to create a vacant position, see there it is, we would then disable this position, but we don't do that anymore. If you wanted this, if you want to say, okay, I've created the vacancy, I know that person's not going to be in there, you can just go in and inactivate that record then. And you can see it picked up our new salary schedule and everything else, picked up the new salary and everything. So those are some really simple things that you can do when you're adding and building your employee base and your staffing plan without having to open that big heavy duty employee details form. Okay, and the split and the move, you don't have to create positions. If you want to move them to a different account code, you can just right click move and change the account code and move it. If you move it on top of another record that exists for that same employee, it'll actually consolidate. It'll sum the work hours, sum the amounts, everything, and create a single record for them both. And when it's important to remember that even though we move a record from here, we will leave the Infinite Visions and the Infinite Visions daily records in their place because that's where they currently are. It's not like we're going to move this whole row. We're just going to clear out the green and create a new record and recalculate it with the new move. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, it's 2:57. We're almost tied up here. When employees are reloaded from payroll or from the ERP system, if we find an employee has got multiple salary schedules, in other words, if they're both, let's say they're on a coaching, well, coaching's not typically supplemental pay. Let's say they're typically on a custodian salary schedule and a food services salary schedule. It's going to create a unique record, which is a kind of an arbitrary number to separate those two positions from each other so that they can have individual salary schedules. That provides, if you wanted to split one versus the other, they're not really a split position. It's almost like they have two jobs, but their FTE and total FTE does add up, is cumulative for both of them. Okay. One of the cool things that we've done is we've cleaned up the benefits and the fixed cost tooltips. And if you remember, if you're looking at any of the grids and there's a little tooltip balloon in the lower left corner of the cell heading, that means that there's a tooltip there for that data. And so here's the fixed cost detail for this particular funding. It tells you what the fixed cost was, the total wages, total work time, and then it breaks out the calculations for you. It tells you how much it calculated for PERS, bond, Social Security, workers' comp. The same is true with benefits. We cleaned up the formatting on these tooltips is what the change is. It tells you what level of the benefit plan it was, how many work days were required, what the annual amount, monthly amount, and a participation factor. These other, you won't see these other numbers. These are there for my use because I'm signed in as ESP support. This helps us if you're having trouble. We can get some additional details. I guess you'll see the inflation factor and account mask, but you won't see this bottom row. So we are seeing some additional information, but we fixed that up. One of the things that, do I have a baseline? I think I do, but I don't know that I've saved it since we fixed this. Fixed costs. Fixed cost total. Oh, I made a change. I set Joy Simpson to inactive. But it used to be that this tooltip breakdown for fixed costs was only visible for the model, but it's now included in the baseline. And we'll see if it's actually there. Yep, it is there. So if you're making changes, you could go in and turn on model, turn on all the fixed costs, and see them column by column, and then you'd have to do the same for the baseline. Or you could just look at the two tooltips and figure out what's changed or what the differences are if you're needing to drill into it that deep. Okay, it's 3 o'clock. So we made it to 13, employee group 13. And unless somebody has any questions, I'm going to let you go, and we'll pick it up right here tomorrow, same time. Any questions? No. Wow. Quiet group. Tammy, you asked the only question today. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
All right.
Thanks, Jim.
Bye.